When they click on an ad, it takes them anywhere between 6 to 12 months to actually apply. So we can actually see like the time they clicked on the ad and the time they applied. That to me indicates when you're trying to market to them, you want to give them as much information as possible because that's what they're seeking.
Today, we're taking a hard look at lead generation in higher education, specifically why it doesn't work. Traditional lead generation strategies focus on capturing names and emails through RFI forms and hoping prospects will convert. But here's the problem. Most of enrolled students never even submit a lead form. So why do we keep treating students like sales prospects rather than informed decision makers? And more importantly, what should universities be doing instead? To break this down, I'm joined by Robert Kadar, a seasoned expert with over 15 years in marketing, enrollment, and media strategy for higher education. He's worked in some of the largest and most complex universities in the country, integrating data-driven strategies that actually drive results. Robert, welcome to the application.
Thanks for having me.
This is really
Nice to join.
exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting. And Robert is actually going to be presenting at EduWeb Summit this summer in July, so you'll be able to get the full view from his presentation, but we're going to give you quite a preview in our conversation right now. Robert, let's start with a big one, really the question of the day. Why do you think lead generation as we know it just isn't working in higher ed?
Sure. Yeah. So just a little bit of background for how I landed on this kind of a revelation because I used to do lead generation myself, but my background was like as an undergraduate and graduate student in science and evolutionary biology. And I was always curious about testing, experimenting things and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And so when I got into higher ed marketing for the first time, actually marketing in general for the first time, I was just curious, like, because everyone was doing lead generation, I was like, how do we know that this actually works? How do we actually track it all the way through and see that this actually has the effect that we want it to have? And so when I first started my career, I started building these lead generation campaigns, building landing pages and digital advertisements, figuring out how the ad platforms work, how attribution works, how tracking works, all the way trying to track everyone from an ad click to a actual applicant and hopefully actually to a student. And so there's a bunch of technical challenges that we can get into later, but the short answer is that for a long period of time, what I noticed was that when we got all these great leads, or what we thought were great leads, and in terms of huge volume and the amount of quality submissions we got, we would hand those off to our admissions team or the recruitment team to do the follow-up and nurturing of those leads. And most of the time, we didn't get much of a, like, wow, we're getting all of these students from all of these leads and stuff like that. And I was always curious, well, are these leads actually converting? How do we know they're converting? And of course, you could do one thing, which I think a lot of people do, which is you could take the leads of your list, the list of leads, and you could take the list of your actual students and try to overlap them and see how many match. But no one was asking the question, which was how many enrolled students had previously filled out any kind of form on the website, landing page, whether they came from an ad or whether they came from just organically from search. Over the course of my career, I really wanted to answer that question. I wanted to look back at current students and see who actually filled out any of that information. And so when I was able to get a position where I was able to lead both the marketing CRM and the enrollment CRM and combine that data to make sure that we had connections between that information, I was able to look back and say how many enrolled students submitted form, and it was shocking to me. I only found that, well, let me just say it this way, 90% of students had never previously filled out a form on the website organically or through advertisements. So that's how I know that most students, overwhelming majority of students, are not really interested in lead forms and filling out forms. And that was a shocking revelation, and it's changed the way that I've done marketing.
I can totally understand what you're saying, that most, when you look at an actual pool of students that enroll, that most of them never filled out a form. On the other hand, the ones that do are really interested, right? Because they're actually willing to fill out maybe even a cumbersome form, right? And let us know that they're interested. So it's interesting how we might see that play out. What emphasis do you put and where? So we know that students are they're already researching programs. We know they're reading reviews, they're going to social media channels, they are watching YouTube videos, right? And they're doing all of that before they apply to our schools. So it does make you wonder why we cling to these outdated tactics. Why do we run an entire ad campaign whose goal is lead generation? Why do you think we're clinging to this?
That's a great question. And I was thinking about it a lot. I looked at my own reasons for doing that when I was focused on lead generation. One of the things that I think I realized about, at least about myself, and I think it might be attributable to others in the industry, is that when we look at like best practices from a lot of these lead generation tools and like the marketing CRM technologies that are out there, most of the best practices or recommendations is really focused on, I think about it as kind of like an audience that we think they know how to act, but we don't really actually test whether they know if they're actually acting that way. So we think
Yeah.
about like an audience that needs to get to your landing page, and we think about what's the end goal because we're very marketing and sales driven mentality, and we think about the end goal being, hey, we need to get these people to take a specific action. And we think that if we just put a form on that page with very little information and have them focus on that specific action, they're going to take that specific action. These are common recommendations. I just looked at what HubSpot one of the leading CRMs recommended the other day, and it basically says when you send an ad clicker to a landing page, it says make sure the landing page is almost naked. That's what they use. Barely any navigation to get to any other pages of your website, sparse content on your site. Really have your ad clicker focus on the form and the button, the call to action. That's what the recommendations are. And so I think a lot of us in the industry follow those recommendations because we trust in the reputation of these big giant companies. And that's where I think it started. I mean, that's how it worked for me. But another challenge is that higher ed marketers really, what I think is they have their hands tied behind their back often when they do marketing because they can't see the connection between the data connection between marketing and the student enrollment. They're oftentimes siloed in higher ed on the enrollment side and the marketing side. So it's really hard to know if any lead generation actually works or not. And it's really hard to track back, like I said earlier, from your students' interactions and their historical interactions with all of your digital collateral or assets like your website or emails and so on. So it's really hard to actually see the full funnel. So I think that's what's happening as well.
Yeah, clearly the light bulb moment for you was when you were able to connect those two CRMs together. That's so you could see the through line. If you can't see that through line, you don't really know what your impact is. It's sort of on the marketing side, it stops at delivering leads, and then you don't really know the true ROI of it. But what should we be doing instead? So should we be doing a different kind of RFI form? Should it be more like it's the sign up to visit or it's a quiz or something like that? Or should we be focusing on something entirely differently? What should we be doing?
Sure, that's another great question. So in my data, there's 10% of people prospective students who will end up filling out some
Yeah.
type of form and then later applying. So there are a good portion of people who want to get the information that you're offering, want to learn more
It's
through the
just not the
different.
only, that's what you're
Right,
saying. It's just not the
right.
only thing that marketers should focus on.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
I think the prioritization is the problem, right? Right. So I think the fact that when you look at like an ad and you click on an ad from any or many higher ed places, and what you end up going to is mostly a page with limited content and this kind of gated approach to information. I think that's a poor prioritization based on like the prospective students' behavior. What we do see in terms of the prospective students' behavior is that, like you said earlier, what they do is a lot of research. They go to a bunch of different websites, ranking websites. They go to like testimonials, the sites with testimonials, sites with information that current students or alumni have left. Like Reddit is a great location for them. And then when they get to your page, your landing page, what we've seen, or what I've seen at least, is that when they click on an ad, it takes them anywhere between 6 to 12 months to actually apply. So we can actually see like the time they clicked on the ad and the time they apply. That to me indicates that when you're trying to market to them, you want to give them as much information as possible because that's what they're seeking. You want to highlight everything there is to know about the program, what makes it great. You want to give them all of the different avenues that they may want to take to reach out to you. That could be a phone call, it could be an email, it could be text messaging. It also could be like open houses or info sessions. That's what I think is really important. What I think we as marketers often get wrong is we think we can push a certain action onto the prospective student. Like we
Yeah.
think we, and I think the
Because it's what
problem
we
with,
want. It's what we want.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think the problem is we have this marketing mentality of like there's a funnel, a marketing and sales funnel, and if we could just push these people down the funnel, then that's what we can do. But when you look at actual behavior, it's a lot more not as simplistic, and people aren't following our rules; they're following their own rules, and it's going to take them. If you look at actual whether it's actually a funnel or not, prospective students take so much time, but they also go from like down funnel to back up funnel. They go
Yeah.
from
They're
applying,
they're like zigzagging all
yeah,
over the place.
they go from applying to then going back and looking at a YouTube video to
Yeah.
see if they're interested in actually going to that place, right? So they're not really the traditional marketing sales kind of perspective person. They don't follow those rules.
I think the funnel helps us wrap our minds around it in a way because it's hard to wrap your mind around how the student is actually behaving, right? So we think, okay, let's just get more in at the top here and then improve the conversion rate here, here, and here, and then we're going to get our bottom line, right? That's that's just how it's going. So if we're not running campaigns with a goal of lead gen, what is our goal? Are we talking about engagement? Like, how are we being able to track our success? How are we going to figure out what's working?
For sure. I think one of the, from my perspective, one of the primary success metrics is, did you get the student to get all the information from your website through emails and other areas that you're marketing, but did they eventually apply? Did you have some kind of influence? And influence is a broad term, but I've set up a system where I can track our marketing CRM interactions with all the prospective students to the enrollment side interactions. So I can actually see an ad click to an application. And really for us, it's really driving up. At the end of the day, it's really, are we driving applications? Because applications are really what the prospective student actually ends up doing if they get great information about what your program is all about, why your university is a great place to come to. So that's one key metrics, but I don't want to say it's the only key metrics. I think that's our primary metrics, but we also want to make sure we're getting in front of the right audiences, they're engaging, they have high click-through rates, cost per click is reasonable, and all of those other things at the top of the funnel are important to measure. But for us, it's really, we're trying to drive people through our marketing to apply, and then we really created that line, that division between marketing and our recruitment team, where the recruitment team does more of the hand holding and really tries to nurture the applicant through the process.
It sounds to me like applications is the goal, but also higher quality applications, better informed applications is what, on the marketing side, what you're striving for is making sure that they're getting that depth of information rather than just filling out a form, which leads to a better engaged student at the moment of application. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, perfect. And what's really interesting about that is that when you don't optimize for leads and you're just optimizing for applications, what we've seen is that the quality of our leads actually improves over time. Because when you optimize for leads in the ad platforms, they really try to find people who are just these like form submitters, like people who
Yeah.
generally like submitting forms. And it
Okay.
turns out those people tend to not be as qualified than if you just actually don't do an optimization for leads. So yeah, so the same holds true for applications. Is like we really want to make sure that when they apply, they have a high quality score. But in doing so, we want to make sure that it's not just focused on a form application. The information that we're providing them is very in depth about the programs, so that basically in some ways they can say, after they see all the information, I'm not interested, or I am interested. So the quality does funnel in through a marketing approach where you're really trying to give them as much useful information as possible.
Well, it's funny to me because an application is a lead. It's just happening later than we think in traditional ways, right? Because application is the most robust RFI form there is, right? Because that's
Right.
really what an application is. But you're just focusing it on like going deeper into the funnel rather than higher up in the funnel, knowing that the students don't operate in a funnel, but the funnel helps us understand the data. You're just kind of pushing them farther in and strengthening the middle rather than staying so focused on the top. So I can see how that would work and push through to better enrollments. But this is a difficult mind shift because, like you were saying, the HubSpot example of a very super optimized for RFI conversion landing page to now we've really got to be focused on the types of content we're putting out across all of these channels that we know prospective students are on. So on YouTube, the videos, on social media, on making sure that all of the profile sites where your college is listed, that the information there is really robust. Like, right? It's a lot of work. So how do we approach that? And is it possible that generative AI can help with some of that? Is that where we can fill the gap?
Yeah, I think I would start with thinking about how you design your landing pages, like the interactions where your prospective students land, and thinking about what they're interested in first. Like if you can get either qualitative or quantitative data of what they're looking for. And then at the end of the day, I think marketers overthink a lot of what we do. 90% of what we do should just be about telling the prospective student what makes us great, what makes us exceptional, unique, what's our selling, propositions or selling points. And that's really all that we can do. And then the rest is all the other kinds of stuff like how do you target, how do you get in front of the right audience, where do you target, and all of that stuff. So I think giving them all of that information, letting them know what makes you great, that's really all you can do. And then generative AI is a great tool for developing content, right? It's easy to create great content across all the different assets that you have, from your email to your landing pages to your website pages and so on. I just want to caution though that as we all start using generative AI, we're all starting to sound like the same, right?
Yes.
Like that's the big
Yes.
problem with generative AI is like
1,000%.
what we know from our student interaction is that they can sniff out like when you're being fake. Right?
Yeah.
That's why they're not filling out forms, because they know it's kind of it could be like a cheap sales tactic, or you're going to spam them with a bunch of
Yeah.
emails or call them nonstop. So like the caution of a generative AI is like it could come across to a very informed prospective student that this is not really genuine. So I think that's the
Yeah.
challenge, is like you want to really be genuine.
Here's an example that I'm picturing from what you're talking about. We have a landing page now that instead of being almost nothing but a form, there's content that can be tailored to each student, perhaps even a video, right? So what I think AI could help with is if you have a template that you have written for your institution, now where AI can help and create some efficiency is, okay, take this and can you tailor it for a student who's interested in business? And now can you do it for a student interested in science? Now can you do it for a student who's international, right? And sort of, so you're taking what you know to be that unique selling proposition and you're writing with the correct voice and tone for your institution and with the personality of your institution. It's just helping with the iterations on the different ways that you could sort of personalize and customize the content. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, the thing about form submissions that I think most prospective students, why they don't fill it out, is because it's not really personalized.
Yeah.
Like the universities are not spending enough time making sure that when they do fill out a form, the person gets something unique to them, right? A lot of what they do is they fill out the form and they get the general email about the program or the university, or they get a phone call and text messages and stuff like that. It's not really, the value is really not there. So generative AI, if you actually want to produce value, I think there's probably a lot that you can get out of it. Great content, figuring out who the person that you're interacting with, what they're interested in, and then producing content based on that. I agree with you on that.
So Robert, I gotta send you to Sienna's website after this to check out. It's sort of we're using Halda, and I would call it's an RFI, but it doesn't feel like an RFI to the student. But what's really cool is you're not just asking information like sort of demographic information about the student. This actually feels to them sort of like a quiz, and you get to understand where they are and what's important to them, which does allow for that really awesome customized follow-up. But before that even happens, at the end screen after they have submitted, they get really custom content from that's AI driven, but it's all based on their answers, right? So now I don't have to go look all over the website for the thing I'm trying to learn about. It actually gets served right to me. So I think there's ways to be doing RFI in a better way, but then also making sure that we're not, like you said, prioritizing it as the end all be all of our marketing efforts. Are there any schools that you think are just doing this really well? Sort of like this, let's not focus on RFI, and let's just focus on telling our story really well.
Sure. Now I remembered what I was trying to say. So let me jump back if I can for a second on that. So on the prospective student information and personalization, there are some general things that all students are looking for. That's something we actually know from research on from surveys and qualitative stuff from other things. And so what I've done at my university is figure out the buckets of information that prospective students are looking for. And it tends to be similar for undergraduate and graduate, although there's good differences. Yeah. But the buckets of information we see from survey research, when you ask students and their parents, why do they choose certain programs and universities, is basically like this. There's 4 main buckets. One is location. How far is it from me? Where's it located? Where's the university located? It could be online too. What's interesting about location is like when you look at online universities and you ask the question like, what percentage of online universities have students coming actually in from like local areas versus out of state? Like if you take any college, it's like 80% of students are local to the online universities.
It's regional. Yeah.
We have a local brain. We can't break through, it seems like going to a university online in like California from the East Coast or vice versa. So it's interesting.
It's funny.
The second thing is affordability. Is there scholarships available? The third thing is reputation. Like what's the reputation of you? It could be ranking. It could be faculty excellence. It could be things like alumni. Who are the alumni? Where are they? And the fourth thing is outcome, which is if I'm going to pay all this money and spend all this time in a university, what's the likelihood that I get the kind of profession that I want?
Better be worth it.
Yeah, is it worth it?
Better be worth it, yeah.
And then actually there's another one that we don't see on the surveys as much, but we know from the digital interactions from prospective students is what I call experience, which is like, you can see that when you go to your YouTube channel and you see all of the videos. I've done this at CUNY, which has a YouTube channel since the beginning of time. It has like hundreds, maybe tens of millions of views. When you filter by the top most viewed YouTube video, it's really interesting because the top one always tends to be like videos about what it's like to live on campus, what it's like to be a student. These are like the things that we do when we look for like go on vacation, or when we look at a restaurant. We're like, where is that located? What's the street view on Google Maps look like, or something like that? So prospective students care about that. So in terms of generative AI, if you think about focusing on those main areas of content or information that you want to give to prospective students, I think it actually could deliver a lot of value if you train the AI to think like a prospective student, right?
Yeah, so you can actually use the AI to make the content feel really human and feel really centered on the student if you're doing it right. Robert, before we wrap up, what's one key takeaway you'd want listeners to remember about this idea of RFI? It's not working.
Well, I think just try your best to figure out, like, from your student data, like if you could look back at your existing students and figure out how many of those people actually filled out a RFI form. See if what I'm saying is actually fits your
Yep.
case, right? Like, I don't know if it's going to be across the board. I believe it is based on all that because I've been working at multiple institutions. But take a look at the data and see how and make informed decisions based on that. That's number one. For me, what an interesting stat that I think is really calls attention to this thing is like we dropped our RFI submission forms over 1 year by 95%, and our applications increased by 20%.
Wow. Who wouldn't want that?
So that's was a clear sign to me that the RFI or lead generation tactic is not causally connected at all. And in some ways, probably is an impediment to actually promoting your university's uniqueness. And that's one of the reasons I think we saw an increase in our applications, because that's what we focused on, is like really just showcasing what makes us unique.
Robert, I'm with you. I do think that this probably pans out to be true for most institutions. When you look at all of the places enrollments can be sourced from, if you go all the way up to first source, there's all different ones, right? So there's a place, of course, for lead gen and for RFI forms, but it's not leading to 90% of your enrollment, but we're focusing 90% of our marketing effort on it. That's your point.
And dollars.
Yes, and our dollars. Yes. So really it's looking at all of those places where students can be kind of coming into interest for you and where we should be focusing instead of prioritizing just sort of that one thing as our goal as marketers. So I'm totally with you. This has been such a powerful conversation. Thanks so much for breaking down why lead gen isn't our only answer and what we can be doing instead. And for those listening, again, Robert will be presenting at EduWeb in Portland, Maine this July. Come join both of us. I'm the program chair. We've got a great agenda lined up. And if you found today's episode insightful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with your team. Thanks for listening to the application. See you next time.
Thanks, Allison.